Hello, IdeaMe listeners. Anna Guzman, Space Ambassador here with my first interview of 2019. Thank you for tuning in. I really hope you enjoy my chat with NASA aerospace engineer and solar system ambassador, Andrzej Stewart. Andrzej is an experienced spacecraft operator for a wide variety of NASA missions and has worked as a spacecraft mission controller for NASA's Mars orbiter fleet. He now works in mission control at the Johnson Space Center, developing navigation and tracking operations for upcoming missions of the Orion space program. Andrzej aspires to be a NASA astronaut, and in pursuing that, he has served as the flight engineer for Hera C2M2, a 2-week asteroid mission simulation at the Johnson Space Center. He has also served as Chief Engineering Officer of High Seas 4, a year-long Mars simulation mission in Hawaii. Please take a listen as we go further into detail about these missions and other interesting topics in the interview. Hello, Andrzej. Thank you for joining me today for a little chat. How are you doing today?
Doing real well. How are you?
Good, good. So tell the IdeaMe listeners, who are you?
So my name's Andrzej Stewart. I'm an aerospace engineer. I've spent a lot of time operating spacecraft. So I spent a lot of time in Denver, Colorado, working with the interplanetary spacecraft, Mars fleet, Juno, the Grail mission around the moon, and then got interested in human space flight. So now I'm training to be a mission controller at the Johnson Space Center. But between those two, I had a couple of unique experiences. I was one of the crew members for a 2-week human exploration research analog mission here at Johnson Space Center. I enjoyed that so much that I ended up doing it again. But instead of 2 weeks, it was a year out at the Hawaii Space Exploration Analog and Simulation on the northern face of Mauna Loa.
Wow. So that seems to be the big thing nowadays in the news. NASA and other aerospace industry companies and also the international agencies, there seems to be more of an interest in reaching towards Mars. So tell us a little bit about your participation in these Mars simulation missions and give us a description of a day in the life in one of these simulation habitats.
Sure. And really kind of the idea of these analog missions, it's to kind of practice and learn about the human element before we go and send astronauts out to Mars for real.
Mm-hmm.
We think about designing the systems, the spacecraft, the tools we'll use when we get there, but it's just as important that we understand the human aspect as well, especially the psychology involved. We want to make sure that whenever the astronauts get there, they're healthy and happy and ready to work. And there's a lot of stresses that come from being in the isolation, being separated from Earth, and we want to understand those and kind of really get a handle of those before we send astronauts out. As far as a day in the life, I mean, in some ways it's very similar to a day on Earth. I mean, you wake up in the morning, you eat breakfast, you work, you have a lunch break in there somewhere, and then stop for dinner and kind of close out the day. So at least kind of the structure of your day is the same as it would be here,
Mm-hmm.
but there's some key differences. For Hera in particular, our day was very structured. We used the same software that the ISS uses to schedule astronauts. We followed those same types of schedules where we had activities scheduled down to the nearest 5 minutes.
Wow.
So our days were very structured there. It was easy to lose track of time, especially because in Hera we didn't have any view of the outside world. So
Oh,
if you weren't
wow.
watching, so if you weren't watching your watch, it was really easy to lose track. There was one activity I was doing a simulation testing what's called the MMSEV, the multi-mission surface exploration vehicle, and we were learning how to fly that. And we got done with our simulation session, and I was getting ready for the afternoon's next activity. What I didn't realize was it was 7 o'clock at night and it was dinner time. I just completely lost track of
Oh
time.
my goodness. Does it mess with your sleeping patterns to not be able to see the sun or light?
It doesn't mess, at least I didn't find it messing with my sleeping patterns. I'm sure it would if we didn't have any sort of time reference or schedule, but by following that schedule, at least for Hera. Now, high seas was different in that was very unstructured, and I can talk about that in a minute as well. But as far as sleep was concerned, by the time you got to the end of the day, you were very tired and you were kind of ready to be asleep. You had a few surveys you had to fill out at the end of the day and a cognitive test between you and your pillow, but once you got those done, you were ready to go to sleep.
Yeah. Was there anything in particular that a discovery or an experience that totally surprised you in these missions?
This is something I'd say was kind of very personal to me. I'm sure it would be different for everybody else. I'd say the two big things for me was my comfort of being in an environment like that, and then sort of the coming back to Earth afterwards. So for the first one, I did a lot of preparation work, at least for Hera, the first one, getting ready to be in this artificial environment, not seeing plant life, not seeing weather, things like that. There's a scene in the movie Interstellar where Matthew McConaughey's character gives his headset to one of his astronaut buddies, and you hear what's on it, and it's like thunderstorms and natural sounds from Earth. And so I actually went out and got a CD with, I think it was waves crashing on a beach in Hawaii or something like that. And what surprised me was I didn't really need any of those. I actually found I was very comfortable in that environment. And I'm sure this is different for almost everybody else out there, especially because you hear astronauts talking about it a lot, but I actually didn't miss sort of nature as much as I thought I would. So that was something that surprised me.
That's interesting.
Thanks. Again, it was just kind of completely took me by surprise. I thought I'd have missed plant life more and things like that.
Right.
The other one was the transition back to life after the mission. And I was glad I got to do Hera first, just being away for a couple of weeks. I think that really did a lot to prepare me for my high seas mission, especially the post-mission period. You go on a mission like this understanding that life's going to be different, that there's all these new and awesome things you're going to get to do, and it's going to be completely different from what you do here on Earth. But after a while, it just kind of becomes your daily routine, and all the stuff you used to do, you kind of forget. And so you go through this big change to go whenever you start on one of these missions. What maybe you're not thinking about so much is you have to do that whole change in reverse when you come back. So you kind of have to learn how to live back on Earth, back in society again. There's certain activities you forget how to do. I forgot how to grocery shop. So I was in the grocery store after my Hera mission. I had my grocery cart. I had a list of things I needed to get. And, I could see everything in the store, but I'd forgotten where everything was. I wasn't used to choosing between 10 different products, 10 different varieties of the same thing. I just kind of had been eating whatever was on the menu that day. So it was sort of a decision-making process I hadn't exercised in a while.
So the Mars missions are expected to last, 2-3 years maybe? Or
I believe the design reference mission right now is 2.5 years.
Wow.
Something like 6 or 7 months to get out there. Same sort of time frame coming back, and about 18 months on the surface. So I think it adds up to around 2.5 years.
So I noticed in these missions that there's an international presence. People from other countries are also participating. How do you think that contributes to the work environment? Or are there new things that you're learning about each other's culture? Was there preparation prior to this? Were there surprises or awkward moments?
Well, so it depends on the mission. So for Hera, right now, because that's run here on the Johnson Space Center, that one's still just U.S. citizens and permanent residents. So we haven't quite gotten the international mix of crew there just yet. But for high seas, because that's run out of University of Hawaii, it's more university run. As you pointed out, we have had quite a few international crew members for that. We had 2 on my mission, so we had one from France and one from Germany. And you immediately do see sort of a difference in the cultures there. We didn't really have a whole bunch of training beforehand. We did spend some time as sort of pre-training and crew selection. We'd been sent out for a week to Knowles in Idaho to go get leadership training, survival training, and that was sort of our first introduction to our crew. So we kind of at least interacted a little bit. But being in that enclosed environment, definitely there's a lot of differences between the crew members, but you can definitely see a difference when, as you mentioned, whenever you start bringing the international sort of viewpoints as well, just different cultures, different ways of life. And, you kind of actually, I think, want this sort of diversity. I think the saying is, if everybody's thinking the same thing, somebody's not thinking.
Right.
You want a diverse set of viewpoints just for mission safety. You want the one person in there who can look and say, hey, maybe we're doing something wrong here. If, one person who isn't afraid to go against sort of the consensus in case something has been overlooked.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be the same person. But the flip side of that too is, because everybody's got a different background, everybody's got a different opinion, that causes tension and stress in the mission as well. So it's a balance that, again, NASA's studying that as part of this mission, and I think that's something that will be a factor as we do send people out and deeper into space.
So you hear folks, astronauts and whatnot say, the reason for going to Mars is because humans are meant to explore, and, we've been explorers since the beginning of time. Give me something more tangible. Why do you think it's important to go to Mars?
Okay, how long do you have? I've had a long time to think about this in my career, and I agree. It's, the argument saying that we're meant to go to Mars, that's great, but it doesn't pay the bills.
Right.
Taxpayers need more than that. For me, I think the biggest reason we should go to Mars is because it's sort of the closest we have to Earth. And I believe we need to study Earth. We need to understand our effects on Earth, our climate change, our environment. And the problem with studying just Earth is anywhere you look, we've touched the planet and we've affected it in some way or another. And so whenever you're taking your data, you're taking a data set that has been affected by humans. And I think it's important for us to have sort of a control to that experimental group. And I think for me, that's where Mars is invaluable, in that we have this planet that's mostly untouched by human hands. We can see how an Earth-like planet sort of works without our influence. And from there, we can kind of, I think, help, make more inferences to what's going on our own planet. We can more understand kind of what just the planet does naturally versus what effects we might be having on it. Are we hurting our planet in some way? Are there things we need to change? And I think those are questions that are fundamental to kind of our continued existence here on this planet. And so I think it's definitely kind of important that we go out to Mars and have, again, just this contrast to the planet we live on.
So I understand that you have applied to be an astronaut. You were, and you went very far this last go around when they chose the last class. Was it last year?
Actually, I haven't gotten that far. I've at least done the application process a couple of times. I've never gotten to the interview stage yet, though. So.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that process, and I assume that you want to try again. What are your goals? What are you doing now to be a more attractive candidate for NASA?
So the application process for becoming an astronaut, I think it would surprise a lot of people in that it's on USA Jobs. It's the website that you would apply for any government position. So it's just like applying for government positions elsewhere. It's a big resume, essentially. They want you to submit, I think it's about a 6 to 8 page resume, so long form. But the flip side is that's kind of, you have that written space to kind of get your story across. And this time around, they had 18,000 people. So for me, I think that's
insane.
The big challenge of it.
That's crazy.
How do you get your story across effectively in 6 to 8 written pages? There's a couple of extra forms if you're a pilot. There's an aviation experience form. There's sort of a 1 page where you can put a couple of your extracurricular activities. But that's it. That's your whole package to apply to be a NASA astronaut.
And there doesn't seem to be a specific template, because this last class that they chose, the backgrounds and the professions and the practices that these people come from, it's just all over the place. It's varied. What is it that you think they're looking for?
Sure, and that's, I guess, part of the other frustrating part for me as well. But and I've talked to a couple of people who are actually involved with the selection process as well, and they're very good. They're very tight-lipped about it. They don't reveal anything.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is because what they're looking for changes in each round. But as you said, they're kind of looking for a different group of people each time, and even within each class, it's sort of a varied sort of group of people, a wide variety of backgrounds. For me, I've kind of, you go into something competitive like this and you see other people applying, and it's easy to kind of get tied up in thinking, well, that person has done something cool that I haven't.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I should be doing this, or maybe I should be doing that. And I've kind of found a lot of peace, and rather than doing that, just saying, okay, there's 18,000 other people out here. I cannot compare myself to each one of them.
Right.
I'm just going to put together the best packages that I can. And that's definitely reduces the stress a whole lot. I don't have to compete against these other people. I just have to put the best version of me out there that I can.
Tell me about the moment you decided I want to be an astronaut.
The moment I decided I want to be an astronaut, and I can point to one where I kind of rediscovered it, but growing up as a kid, I'm actually not sure if it was a specific moment or not.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was just growing up around certain television programs. I recently rediscovered a program for my son called Button Moon, and it was a British program I watched whenever I grew up, and it was about this kind of family of puppets, and they're made of, spoons and pots and pans, and Mr. Spoon in the first episode gets a present, and it's a rocket ship. And he gets in this rocket ship every episode, and he goes to Button Moon, which is this large button in the blanket sky. And he goes and he takes a telescope and has adventures. And I can see it now. Now that I've seen it, I'm like, I grew up with this. I bet this was it. I bet I wanted to be Mr. Spoon. So I think that was a big one. There was a movie called Space Camp.
Oh, yeah.
It's not the greatest science fiction movie ever, but it had a real space shuttle in it. It had the space shuttle Atlantis.
Mm-hmm.
And, instead of Star Trek or Star Wars, where that's influenced a lot of people, but for me, I never felt like I was going to fly an X-Wing or fly the Starship Enterprise. But Atlantis was a real thing, and that was something I could look at and say, hey, I could actually fly that one day.
Yeah.
So I think that had a big influence on me too. I forgot about it for a number of years. I eventually went and did aerospace engineering at the University of Texas. Didn't really know what I wanted to do with it. And then I saw the Space Station 3D IMAX movie. And
yeah.
the thing I kind of came away from was you see the astronauts floating around, and they're just normal people. And I kind of went home from that evening, kind of thought about it and said, those people up there, they're not magic. They're not grown in test tubes. They're just people who went to college and got good grades. And I'm getting pretty good grades right now. Hey, maybe I could do that.
Right.
So that was kind of what rekindled it, was seeing that movie and just seeing people floating up there.
So if you apply again, and let's say you get accepted, there is a good chance that you might fly to Mars, right? Are you willing to take on that task? Are you looking forward to flying to Mars and living on Mars for a while?
If I were selected as a NASA astronaut, I would be happy to go wherever they would send me, including Mars.
What's the one thing that you're looking forward to the most to see in Mars?
This is going to sound kind of not all that exciting, but I'd be happy to get up there and work. It's, if I want to get to space, but I'd prefer to go as a NASA astronaut rather than like a tourist, just because, you look at space and it's cool, you get to see the Earth and things like that, but ultimately it's a vacuum. There's not a whole bunch to see in space other than space and kind of this vast emptiness. But there's so much to go up and do and so much to accomplish. And I think for me, it would be the opportunity of not just getting to fly in space, but to contribute to something, to kind of push ahead human knowledge. I mean, that was one of the things I enjoyed about the high seas mission in Hera is even if I never get to go to space, hopefully I've done something that's enabled the people that will follow that will get to go. And hopefully because of what I've done, they'll be able to do it more safely and more comfortably.
Something totally unrelated, but might help in your life in Mars, let's say.
Sure.
I noticed reading up on your biographies that you are a musician. You play guitar.
Yes.
And there are studies and there are reports from NASA as well that instead of just focusing on STEM, to broaden to STEAM, which A would stand for the arts. And during my time at NASA, I noticed that astronauts would take their instruments up to the space station. I've met engineers and scientists who, are artistic in some shape and form. How do you think that plays in with such a highly technical lifestyle? Do you think, it's a good idea to have that involvement during your life in space or in Mars? Is it important to have kind of like an equal balance every once in a while to have that artistic escape?
I would say so, and I'm actually going to approach this not from kind of the NASA side, but from the guitarist side. And I was reading, I think it was Guitar World magazine once, and it had a discussion about professional musicians, professional guitarists and rock bands and things, each of them giving kind of their 5 nuggets of wisdom each. And I think the one that resonated with me the most there was once you become a rock star, find a new hobby, because up to this point, guitar playing has been fun. Once you start doing it professionally, it's not going to be fun anymore, and you're going to need a new outlet.
Yeah.
And so now to flip that around, space flight's the same way for me. I mean, I enjoy space flight. I enjoy doing outreach and things like that outside of work. Even a couple of my video games, things like Kerbal Space Program, I enjoy doing space as a hobby. But at some point, you've got to be able to, especially once it becomes a job and becomes the main thing that drives your life, you've got to have that release somewhere. Mm-hmm. You've got to have something that's just completely different. And so absolutely, whether it's music, I know, as you mentioned, a lot of the astronauts have been musicians, or some other artistry. I know Al Bean came back from the moon and became a painter.
Yeah.
If only to, again, have that outlet where it's just something completely different, something where it's not work, as well as especially with art, having a way to convey your journey once you've gotten back. Mm-hmm. Another person I'll mention is Nigel Packham, who's the head of safety here at NASA, and he did a couple of the analogs back in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And what he said was, you think that your analog mission, that's your mission, that's the big part of it, but it turns out you do that for a couple of months or however long it is, and then you spend the rest of your life talking about it. That's your real mission, is everything that comes after. Because I do think it's important that, even for those of us who've only been to simulated space, there's only a few of us that get to do that. And I think it's absolutely important that we convey that so everybody else, especially the folks who may not get a chance to do it, can still live that journey. And I think artistry, music, painting can be a way to get that across as well.
And doing an interview with me.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you so much, and I'm pretty sure our listeners appreciate it greatly and have enjoyed your stories. I'll let you go and get back to work. Thanks a lot for taking some time out of your day to sit down with me. It's been a very interesting conversation. Good luck to you, and take care of yourself, and I hope to see you floating around in space one day.
I hope not to let you down. I hope to get up there too, and thank you for taking the time to interview me today. It's been a pleasure as well. Thank you.
Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Andrzej. For more information about the missions we discussed and for Andrzej's bio, please click on the links in the description of this interview.